Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to the World Travel Market for 2017. My name is Babita Sharma, and I'm from BBC World News, and thank you for letting me escape from the newsroom. It's just nice to have a bit of a breather from Donald Trump for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or the next 60 minutes or so, but I'm sure his name will come up in the conversation because I'm delighted to be with you here today for this afternoon's panel discussion. And for the next hour or so, we're going to be discussing the changing landscape of the travel industry here in the UK and also around the world. A lot is happening, and it has been happening. Brexit, still an unknown entity. We're going to be discussing that and the impact on the businesses of the panelists who will be joining us on stage. Also, the impact of the currency market, fluctuating times, a fall in the pound. What does that mean in real terms? Global politics, that has ramifications for the travel industry, of course. And the state of consumer confidence, which I think is particularly of interest when we look ahead to what 2018 will bring as well. Terrorism, unfortunately, it is a daily occurrence around the world, and many high-profile attacks most recently, and of course here in the UK as well. We'll be looking at that in detail. And also the growth in competition and who we should be wary of or who we should be mindful of when we're looking ahead, trade relations and doing business in the forthcoming months as well. And of course, we're going to be quizzing our panelists, putting them on the spot to ask them what they expect, their little crystal ball for 2018 and beyond. And I'm delighted to say that we have a fantastic panel to discuss all of this with us, all experts in their fields in the UK markets. For our panel discussion, we have Richard Calvert, who is the CEO of Shearings Leisure Group, Peter Shanks, who's the Development Director for Imagine Cruising, Tristram Yarde-Leavett, Managing Director of Tourwise of London, Nick Longman joins us, who is the Managing Director from TUI UK and Ireland. And we have Caroline Bremner, Head of Travel at the team at Euromonitor. And before we get underway, just a couple of notes of how we really want you to get the most out of this next hour or so as well. We're going to be inviting questions from the floor. There'll be a roving microphone. And after we've started the debate, I'll be asking you if you'd like to quiz any of our panelists on stage. Just raise your hand and let me know your name and where you're from, and we'll get that discussion underway as well. There's also, as you will expect, a digital way of getting involved. The team at Slido, again, are here in the Inspire stage to crowdsource audience questions during the session. Now, you'll be able to participate via your mobile devices at slido.com with the hashtag WTMLDN, WTM London. And during the Q&A, the most popular questions will be displayed on the feedback screen that you'll be able to see up there. And I'll put them to our panelists as and when they come through, and the team at Slido will be filtering those questions for us. So please do use that slido.com on your mobile devices with that hashtag WTMLDN, and that's also the one if you want to get us trending this afternoon. There is quite a lot of activity on social media, but please do get involved on Twitter as well. World Travel Market is the Twitter handle. So I'd like to get this session underway, and I'd like to invite firstly Caroline Bremner, before we get our panelists on stage, who's going to present a short presentation from the team at Euromonitor of what the UK travel market in 2017 has looked like and what we can expect for 2018. Please welcome Caroline on stage.
Thank you, Babita, for that very warm welcome to WTM today. So I'm really delighted to be here and to present our very latest research from Euromonitor International about what to expect in the year ahead, 2018 and beyond. So before we deep dive into the UK, let's take a look and get a sense check of what's happening in terms of global arrivals and expenditure. So already today, 2017, there are 1.2 billion arrivals taken every single year. And global arrivals are growing strongly at over 4%. This is data taken from the UNWTO. And what we've done is forecast this out for the next 5 years. What you can see is this continuous growth in the global market. This is very much driven by the likes of Asia We have very strong growth in intra-regional travel in Asia, for example, China, India, and Southeast Asia. But equally, we're seeing recovery in the traditional markets in Western Europe, as well as in North America. And of course, in Western Europe, we've suffered some terrorism attacks over the past few years, such as France, which is the leading destination globally. And that's now back on track. It's now in recovery phase. But what we're seeing in terms of average spending is this price pressure, particularly in the short term. So yes, there is growth in the market, but there are also challenges and threats there. So when we look at leading inbound tourism markets across the world, the US is the top spender, recipient of inbound receipts, followed by China, Thailand, Spain, and then we also have, in 8th place, the UK. The UK has actually performed very well over the past 5 years and will continue to grow. We've seen this currency depreciation, which has actually been a boom for inbound tourism into the UK. More on that later. Obviously, thanks to Brexit, there are some sort of positive benefits of a weak currency, making the UK a much more affordable destination for visitors from Europe, from North America, as well as Asia. And the UK has also outperformed its European neighbours, so that's on the inbound side, it's quite positive. Before we move forward into looking at arrivals in more detail, let's just take a moment to look at what's happening in the broader economy. So what we're seeing since the Brexit vote, so that was June 2016, only last year, we've seen this sort of slowdown in the UK economy. And of course, this is of massive interest to the travel industry. And so we're seeing currently in 2017 economic growth of 1.7%. Now, if there were to be a transitional deal with the EU, or there is some form of agreement with the EU, we expect that the UK economy will continue at that sort of 1.5 to 2% growth. However, if we're facing a no-deal Brexit, this is the hard Brexit, where there are no conditions, no agreements in place, and everything reverts back to the World Trade Organization conditions, then this would definitely impact negatively the UK economy. And of course, there's a lot of uncertainty in the UK market at the moment. So what we're facing is that, yes, tourism expenditure, inbound receipts into the UK is growing strongly. We have expenditure by UK residents abroad and domestically growing about 4% a year, which is faster than the economy. It's faster than growth in the retailing sector. However, not so fast as our expenditure on cars, which is growing really well at 7%. So let's take a look at the consumer confidence data that Babita mentioned. What we have here is the sort of historic performance since 2013. And you can see these kind of peaks and troughs over the past 5 years. And of course, because of that uncertainty in the UK economy, we have seen this sharp drop-off since the Brexit vote. And what's interesting to see is this divergence between consumers and businesses. So consumers are continuing to feel the price pressures, the impact of the rising cost of goods and services because of the falling pound. We're seeing import prices rise. We've had interest rates rise. So there are some big challenges facing consumers and their household expenditure. So their confidence is definitely being dampened. But we have this divergence with the businesses in the UK, which are sort of beginning to recover and are showing a bit more confidence and resilience, particularly as the negotiations for Brexit continue. So what's happening with the UK inbound market? Well, there is this Brexit bounce, so that is the good news. Because of the fall in the pound, it's initially lost about 15% of its value against the dollar, the euro. It's now settled around about 9-10%. That means that it's much cheaper to come to the UK, and we've always traditionally been seen as a sort of expensive destination. So this has helped recalibrate our price positioning. We are now deemed value for money. And so what we're seeing is that inbound arrivals to the UK have risen sort of 4 or 5% in the past year. The data from the Office of National Statistics puts the recent data in July this year for that year-to-date growth of 8%. So there is this strong impetus, and this is really quite surprising because if you consider that the UK has been the victim of terrorism, 3 or 4 attacks on UK soil this year alone, but it's not impacting demand from international source markets. So here we have the outlook, whether there's a no-deal Brexit, so that's where we have no agreement with our EU partners, and that would actually have a further knock-on positive effect on UK inbound because the pound would continue to fall. However, a light Brexit deal, which is where there's a transition, we have more compromise, and we have continued access to the common market, there would be less stronger, sort of weaker growth, if you like, because the pound would start to rally and start to rise. So here we're looking at domestic tourism. Now, when you look across Europe, domestic tourism is the bedrock of tourism demand. And we can see that the leading European markets are Germany, France, Spain, followed by the UK. Now, the UK market is very mature, so it's performed well in the past 5 years, but we're not expecting a major pickup over the next years to come. Here we're turning to the outbound. So this is a very different story when you look at Brexit. Because of those price pressures that we talked about, the fall of the pound makes it much more expensive for UK residents to travel abroad. The impact of rising oil prices, all those contributes to the fact that UK outbound expenditure is going to be constrained. It's still growing, but at the same time, its potential is not necessarily going to be as strong as it could have been. And we, the UK, are the 4th largest spending nation on travel abroad, so we definitely love our holidays, and we expect expenditure to reach 100 billion by 2024, which is an amazing benchmark. But what happens if there's this no-deal Brexit? Because we're looking at that sort of almost 50% probability that this might happen. And the fact is that this potentially could have a major, serious negative effect on outbound demand and reduce potential growth in the market by taking out 5 million departures from the potential growth that we could see. So that's undermining the potential of the UK outbound demand market, and that would reduce demand by about 5%. So that is the worst case scenario. But we also have to think about those destinations that are exposed to this. And of course, the UK is a very large and significant outbound source of demand for countries such as France, Spain, Ireland, all around the world. And we expect that this would hit Spain the hardest because that's our largest departure destination. And potentially Spain could see 1 million less visitors over the next 5 years. So hopefully, as you can see, there's some good news and some bad news, and I very much look forward to discussing the trends with the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. That's great. Would you join us for our panel discussion? That'd be wonderful, because there's so much that you alluded to. Every year I'm always fascinated with Euromonitor, because they come out with these, can I say crystal ball predictions?
Yes, you could.
But you're usually spot on.
Are you saying I'm a witch?
No, not at all. No, most definitely not. But they're usually spot on, and it's so fascinating to see those predictions, and we'll talk about how you collect that information. Yeah. But let's get our panel discussion underway, and I'd like to invite our esteemed panel of guests, please, on stage. Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you want me to grab you? Are you okay? Oh, the power of technology. You're great. Well, lovely, wonderful. Well, welcome to you all. We're great to have you with us, and I think we'll start off, if we can, by just getting a general overview of your business and how you operate and the markets that you cover, particularly outbound and inbound, and then we'll talk about some of the points that Caroline raised in her presentation. Richard, if I can start with you. Shearings previously famous as a coach company, but that's only part of the business. Tell us how it all comes together and how you operate today.
Okay, so Shearings is a business that's 110 years old. Its heartland is in coach travel, but I have 2,600 colleagues of mine, and we are a tour operator, an events operator, and also a hotel company. So, for example, we have 45 hotels that we own and operate throughout the UK, from the very north of Scotland to the very southwest of England and Wales. And as I said, probably the history of the business is through coach holidays, predominantly in the UK. About 85% of our business is UK travel. We have 240 coaches that we operate. We're the largest escorted tours operator in the UK, and also the largest coach package holiday operator. And quite a big expanding part of our business now is the events business. We do everything from music concerts, Royal Horticultural Society shows, the Edinburgh Tattoo, Legoland, Alton Towers, etc., etc. So we're trying to diversify as well, and also growing our outbound to Asia, the Americas, and Europe.
Okay, we'll ask you which side of the business is doing better later on, if that's okay.
Fine.
Give us an honest answer.
Yeah, we'll.
Nick, in the past few weeks, and a lot of people here have been talking about the rebranding of Thomson Holidays. Being told the biggest and most trusted brand in the UK. Give us an idea of how that's affected the business and what you see happening at the moment.
Well, it was only 2 weeks ago we rebranded, so it's fairly early days. But no, it's not a decision you take lightly. We'd been Thomson for over 50 years, and as you say, a hugely trusted brand. But for many reasons, we felt it was the right thing to move to the TUI brand. All of the other businesses within the TUI portfolio moved. We were insistent we would be the last brand to move. We wanted to understand the experience in other countries. And I think for me, the main reason we did it was around expansion of the portfolio of holidays that we sell. I think legacy is a great thing, but it can also be a bit limiting as well. And Thomson was really synonymous with beach holidays. And the research we did said that when we wanted to look at new things like multi-centres, like city breaks, like tours, that we were more likely to be put in a consideration set if we did that under TUI. So I think that was the thing that finally convinced us that it would be the right thing to do as we want to expand our brand going forward.
You don't quite know yet, though, do you? How it's going to pan out?
Well, I'm pretty confident it's panned out well in all the other markets. We've already hit our unaided awareness target that we had set by Christmas. We've already hit it now.
What does that mean, unaided awareness?
So that means where you're asked, if you asked what brands you've heard of in terms of travel, and then you actually say TUI is one of those. We started at about 4%, and we're over 30 at this point in time, which in a few weeks is a pretty good achievement.
And the core business for people that don't know, for you?
So the core business is overseas package holidays. We take about 5.5 million people away from the UK, have turnover of over 5 billion. We have 62 of our own aircraft, so over 90% of our customers fly on our own planes, and they stay, 80% of them stay in hotels that are exclusive to us, that are only available through the Thomson, now the TUI brand. We still have over 600 retail stores, and that's now stabilised. We're not likely to change that number of stores very much, and they contribute about 30% of our sales, and about 60% of our sales come online. So we're a truly vertically integrated tour operator.
So much to ask you, and we will get into the crux of that, but thank you very much for outlining that. Tristram, you're owned by Globus Cosmos Group. Keen to find out how the group structures now, because you sold Monarch and Cosmos tour operators last year. So if you can give us an overview of how things are at the moment.
Well, Monarch was sold by our shareholders, let's say 3 years ago. So that side of the business went a long time ago. I actually work on the other side of the business, which for us here is an inbound. I'm the MD of a company called Tourwise of London. We're the inbound ground handlers for everything Globus and Cosmos. And for those that don't know, Globus and Cosmos are predominantly coach touring brands. And we sell our products in the US, Canada, Australia and New Zealand predominantly. So we are slightly weighted towards North America for sure. So American inbound business, that's for us.
Get on, both of you? Good terms?
Well, it's interesting. We're the same business, but different markets.
Right.
So he's obviously on a different scale. How many hundreds of years have you been going?
110.
110. So we're 90. So coach touring is
not a lot in it.
Yeah. Coach touring is a mature business. I mean, that's for sure. And it's not perhaps the most sexy of industries and the most sexy way to go on holiday, but nonetheless, it's a pretty stable sector that has longevity for sure.
Yeah, we'll talk about the sexiness, as you put it, of the coach industry, because I know that demographics come into play and the way that the maturer passenger, shall we say, or the active holiday contributor is changing. We'll discuss that more. But Peter, let me ask you about Imagine Cruising. Not a cruise operator. Tell us more.
So we're just 6 years old, and that's just fine with us. Our founder and CEO, Robin Della, saw an opportunity in 2011 with a fast-growing cruise market to look at combining the cruise with the stay, to offer more than just the cruise. And that's really captured the imagination now. It's interesting to be at World Travel Market where historically cruise hasn't had a role to play at the World Travel Market. It's all about land. And whilst our business started as a cruise business, it's now as much a land business, and we're always looking for DMCs and innovative land content. So 6 years on, we're selling around 50,000 cruise and stay holidays a year. We started in the UK, and we're now trading in South Africa, Dubai, and most recently we opened in Australia, which is showing good, strong demand. So essentially we create luxury cruise and stay holidays, bringing together the cruise and the land as well.
And that expansion outside of the UK, for you, when you talk about Dubai and South Africa, which markets have been particularly active and keen for you guys to
2 years ago, Donata, part of the Emirates Group, took a majority stake in Imagine Cruising, which aids our growth. Hence, we're in Dubai. Dubai is not the biggest cruise market, but we've proved there is a market in Dubai. South Africa is a market that's interesting. We started selling cruise and stay. We're now selling holidays as well, because the cruise market is fairly limited in Africa. But Australia is the fourth biggest cruise market in the world, over 1.2 million people cruising. And that's a really good place for us to be with our expertise.
There is obviously the common thread of the international markets when you consider inbound and outbound. And I want to pick up on a couple of points in Caroline's presentation. Firstly, just to get your ideas of what for you stood out from what Caroline said. I mean, Nick, was there anything in particular? We will talk about Brexit, by the way, but consumer confidence that Caroline alluded to?
Yeah, I think the consumer confidence point stood out for me. I think post-Brexit, we were all expecting a dip in consumer confidence, and then immediately it didn't come. It hasn't really come. But I know there was a Deloitte report out last week saying consumer confidence is likely to be lower next year. That was echoed in terms of the report. So I think for all of us, it's now what that actually means in terms of demand for holidays, because I think there is one thing around consumer confidence, but we've certainly seen over the years people view holidays now as an absolute must. It isn't something that generally they choose to not buy. It's just what type of holiday they buy. So I think we have to see how that reduction in consumer confidence actually manifests itself into demand.
How are you feeling about it?
I think it's something that we've known was coming. I think it's probably slightly later than that. And what we found is, through this year as well, demand has been very robust. What people have done is manage their budgets probably a bit more tightly. Right. And I think that's what I'll anticipate happening next year as well. But I think people will still be going on holiday.
That's quite a positive viewpoint. Peter, would that be something that you agree with?
I think so. If you look at the numbers in cruise, there's about 25.5 million people cruising this year, and the estimate is that will be about a 5% growth year on year. If you look at the big two players, Carnival and Royal Caribbean, they're reporting quarter on quarter record yield increases of around 5%, demand strong around the world. And the cruise is a very international business, so when one market declines, others can grow. And the big change in cruise is new markets. So Asia now has over 3 million cruises, and that's opened up a whole new dynamic for the industry, both in terms of Asians cruising and ships being deployed in Asia. So the choice of cruising has grown. But in terms of our business, we've grown by around a third over the last 2 years. We're looking to do something similar this year.
Inside the UK?
Inside the UK. So as long as you're innovative with your product, which is really important, and you're up to speed with all the latest marketing, then you can drive demand. And so far, touch wood, this year has proven to be quite strong.
And that's, I suppose, slightly contradictory when we're looking at what might happen for 2018. Caroline?
Well, not necessarily, because I think what you've just said is very important, that you have to understand your market and you have to understand the consumer, and it's all about the customer experience. And so, leveraging new technology, leveraging new media techniques, and, social media, advertising, the whole, package. It's about making sure that you can gather as much information on your customers and tailor the product to them, so that there is this connection, this emotional connection with the consumer, so that they will continue to trust in you and to buy with you.
I was saying that in terms of the figures that you had shown about, in particular, UK consumer confidence looking ahead.
Those figures go up to the latest year, 2017. So it is above the long-term average, but it's very, very close to zero. So it shows that there is pressure there.
Sure.
UK consumers are under pressure. We've got the latest quarterly data on GDP from the ONS is 0.4%. And the economy is not, in its full capacity, if you like. So that is going to act as a drag on consumer spending.
So Nick and Peter, you're feeling pretty confident, providing that you've got the right strategy to look ahead. I mean, Tristram, you going to agree with that perspective when you look at the UK consumer confidence?
Well, for me, it's more, I deal with the American market. So it's more the confidence that is seen in America, the equivalent figure in the US. And it's interesting, some of the figures you're putting up there, that actually everything seemed to be on track for 2017. And it's quite true to say that the American market is less fickle these days than it used to be. Certainly, even 5-10 years ago, if there was an issue in Europe, the Americans would react to it. And what is interesting to have witnessed this year with the problems that were going on in London, there was virtually no reaction from the clients that we had.
Are you referring
to London Bridge, Westminster Bridge?
The terrorist attack?
Yeah. So it's interesting that 20 years ago, our clients would have been queuing up to fly home after something like that. But these days, they're far more resilient. Now, the figures that were shown to us before were all very promising for this year, and I agree with them by and large. But I think in the inbound American market, that actually we will probably see the effects of the terrorism incidents coming up over the next 6 months, in the next booking period. It's a little bit slower, I think, than we would like it to be at this time. And when we compare to this time last year, in America we had an election to contend with this time last year. And I do think that we're not seeing, despite the consumer confidence and despite the very weak pound, we're not seeing the kind of growth that we perhaps would have expected. And I'm putting that down to the effects of the safety aspects that we saw earlier on this year.
That's interesting. So you're almost saying that there's a trickle-down effect that can come perhaps 6 months after, a few months after.
Well, I think to me what it showed is that people were not going to change their plans having made those plans. But it might be a part of the decision-making process when they're booking their holidays moving forward.
Interesting. Okay, Richard, would like you to also respond to what you saw in Caroline's presentation and what you've heard as well.
Yeah, without doubt, 2018 the consumer confidence is showing a downturn, and both on what Caroline presented, and also I think there was a recent survey that Deloitte came out with a couple of weeks ago, stating that 2018 consumer confidence is on the decline. However, I would base it on, I'm sort of cautiously optimistic, and the caution being from consumer confidence. Brexit is always on everybody's tongue, and also the overcapacity in the marketplace. If you look at all the big players, Ryanair, EasyJet, and all Norwegian, they're putting a ton of capacity into the market. So that's my cautious side. On the optimistic side, from a personal point of view, my customers are generally 60 plus. They travel multiple times with us in the year. So I think possibly they may, as Nick alluded to, rein back on the frequency that they're travelling, but they will still travel. And predominantly, my business is UK domestic. But I think you have to be resolute in what your strategy is and aligning your strategy on differentiation, making sure you communicate with the customers properly and regularly with the right content. So cautious on the capacity and Brexit fears, optimistic that you have to be resolute with your strategy.
How much does the demographic concern you and their changing behaviour?
I think, this year's sort of 60-year-old is really, tomorrow's 50-year-old. And I think people are becoming more active. In my demographic, or my customers, as I said, predominantly 60 plus. If you look at any of the statistics, they were probably Brexiteers. I won't speak on behalf of any of my customers, but the 18 to 24-year-olds voted to remain, the 60 plus voted to leave. But they are seasoned travellers. They have more time on their hands because many of them are retired, and they want to get away. It's I think getting a break, whatever age you are, is become an essential purchase rather than a nice to have.
Right. Tristram, is that something that you concur with?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're dealing with a long haul, effectively, inbound. But I can imagine your scenario. You've got a nice market, really, in the UK. You obviously got a fantastic brand. But with the US, I guess, it's a big investment in terms of spend to come over here. It's more attractive now than it has been for many years. So, yeah.
I think the Brits are really confident when it comes to travelling. So whenever we have these peaks and troughs in the market over the years, and everyone talks about consumer confidence dipping, holidays are always the last thing they let go. So where the new fridge or the new car, they can let them. But Brits love their holidays. So I think we sometimes over-egg the consumer confidence because time after time, the travel sector seems to work hard to outperform that. And the other thing the travel industry does and cruise do is you have to create the product. And we're fortunate in cruise, certainly in our little business, there are 81 new ships on order, and the cruise market is set to grow by around 40% over the next 6 to 7 years. So when you have the confidence that the product is coming and it's innovative and different, then you can work really hard to overcome consumer confidence and have a positive outlook.
Yeah.
I think I was going to pick up on a point Richard and Peter made, which I think is a good one, is that consumer confidence generally for outbound kind of core holidays has not been the key differentiator. I've been with TUI nearly 20 years, and from my perspective, it's more about supply in terms of how much supply there is in the market as opposed to whether consumers, the level of confidence they're feeling.
Interesting, so they're not necessarily going away from the playing ground, if you like. What you're saying is that actually there needs to be more within that for them to use.
Well, I think what I'm saying is demand generally is there. It's the type of demand that can vary, and you might not do your second or third holiday or your weekend break, but your core holiday you will still go on. I think where the travel industry has had more difficult years is when there's just too much supply in the marketplace.
Right. You're nodding away there, Richard.
Yeah, absolutely. We recently went on an industry conference where I think the top 5 airlines were all growing their capacity next year in double digit, and all 5, their yield, so the pricing, what they're selling, all 5 were down. So capacity's up, yields down. So in one sense, I think somebody even used the word, it's a perfect storm in an environment where consumer confidence is not at its optimum level for outbound.
I know that you're talking about the American market, Tristan, but I'm going to put this to all of you, and I don't know if you saw Travel Weekly last week, but they carried a report entitled "Fewer Brits See Overseas Holidays as a Good Value Mechanism to Enjoy a Break." The proportion of UK adults agreeing overseas holidays represents good value. That fell by 8%, percentage points even, from 51% a year ago to 43% in September. So, Nick, although you're saying that you think that they still want their annual holiday, the choices or the decision-making about what they're doing outside of that is perhaps not as good as it used to be.
I actually think that survey kind of reiterates what we've been saying. So if you went on a holiday last year and as a family it cost you £5,000, it's probably going to cost you more like £5,500 this year. So when you make that observation about value, if you went on the same holiday, you'd probably say, I've had to pay a lot more for the same holiday.
Yeah.
What that will mean, though, is that, as I said earlier, I think it means people will stick to their budget of £5,000 and work out what they can do for that £5,000. So whilst there might be the reality that the value has become slightly worse, they will still go on holiday. They'll just work out their budgets accordingly.
I think there's more choice as well nowadays. Peter was talking about river cruising. That market's exploded. The ocean cruising, the adventure sector, and even soft adventure. Adventure isn't somebody who's 18 to 30 going on a thrill-seeking holiday. There's so many operators, they're good operators who 60, 70, 50-year-old can find out. So I think there's more to offer than there's ever been. Even UK holidays, fantastic destinations. But it's just, how do you match that huge amount of offering with a massive amount of supply? And
sure. I'll come to you in a minute, Peter. I just wanted to bring in Tristram because I know we're looking at the UK. That particular report refers to fewer Brits seeing the value of going overseas on a holiday. I'm wondering if you can give me some kind of an assessment of whether that applies to Americans when they're leaving to the other side, if you like.
I think in our sector we are unashamedly mass market, mid-market company. That's what we do. We carry a lot of people on a lot of coach tours, and we're very, very proud to do it. I think the key to our sector is all about value. I mean, it sounds very cliched and simple, but it is about value. Refer back to what I touched on before. You know, coach touring is not the sexiest of holidays. Frankly, we recognise that, but what we can provide is value. If we have the value, then we're confident our products will sell, and that's probably true in any market.
Peter?
I think the hard fact is the exchange rate has moved, and therefore if you're comparing year on year, some things will cost more. But I think our customers are telling us that the value for money when you travel overseas is still phenomenal. Right. So I was in the States last week on holiday, and I had a rather enormous Avis car hire, and I filled it up for $58, not the $200 I pay in this country. We're doing a lot of business at the moment to India, to Bali, and the quality of hotels and tours you can get in those destinations, for example, is fantastic value for money. So I think customers demand value for money, and when they're travelling today, they're definitely seeing value for money. It varies by destination, and we're quite clever at making sure we change our marketing, change our products to feature the destinations that offer both the intrigue and the value for money. But I think value for money, without saying anything against inbound tourism, I think value for money when you travel today is still phenomenal.
We're very lucky this afternoon to have a number of industry experts in the audience, and I just want to pick out a few of them who'd like to share their thoughts and ask you questions. I think Dermot Blasland's here in the audience. Dermot, if you could just raise your hand if you are here. There he is. We'll just get a microphone to you if we can, and I know you wanted to ask a question. There should be one coming. Yeah, it's just coming your way. And Dermot, if you could just say where you're from and your question to the team would be great.
I did ask to be last, but that's been ignored.
Best things come first, I think.
Yeah, I'm a non-exec director at an online travel agent called Love Holidays, which is only 5 years old. It's for Nick. Looking at the characteristics going forward, they're obviously growth, even in the worst scenario, although modest. But the statistics show passenger numbers will be up, but the revenue's growing less than that. Therefore, the average price is coming down. Do you think that's going to play more into Jet 2? And you can see them getting bigger because they're in the 3-star price point and maybe create difficulties?
So I think, Dermot, that what we're going to see comes back to that value proposition. You know, as I mentioned, people have got a budget, they're trying to work within that. We've seen tremendous growth, for example, in Bulgaria as an outbound destination. It's somewhere where there's a lot of new product and you can get really good value. So I think what will happen is when we're in a slightly more difficult situation where the consumer confidence is low, where maybe demand is a bit more suppressed, I think we'll see a flight to better value destinations. It'll be very interesting if Sharm comes back online. That's always historically been a great value destination with great hotels. So I think what we'll find is over this period, we'll see a remixing into value destinations. And I think as a tour operator like TUI, it's up to us to make sure we've got the right product mix that's reflective of kind of current customer thinking.
Would anybody else like to add to that?
Just one thing that seems to be missing is the whole sharing economy and the rise of Airbnb, and the fact that, you know, consumers are also, you know, very confident about booking online. They'll book a low-cost airline, they'll then choose Airbnb, and this is this kind of trading down. So not necessarily relying on the package market, but wanting that sort of level of flexibility, you know, a bit more tailored to their individual tastes. So just wondered, you know, what you what are your thoughts about the sharing economy?
Are you worried by that, Nick?
I think the sharing economy and the traditional tour operating businesses can live side by side, absolutely. Yep. Some of the customers will be the same and some of the customers will be different. Often if you look at what we call the kind of real holiday, the core summer holiday, people don't want to take a chance. When you're in the sharing economy, sometimes it might not work out quite as well as you wanted and things don't go to plan. And so I think you're much more likely to want to utilise that if it's your weekend break, if it's, say, the two of you. If you're on your family holiday, I think you want some assurance. And actually, interestingly, I think when you're in where customers are slightly more nervous and consumer demand is slightly lower, they do tend to gravitate to the bigger brands, the trusted, the longer established brands as well. So to some degree, that could be in our favour at TUI.
And perhaps, Peter, being a younger company, I mean, is that of a concern too?
I think if you remember, Ryanair and EasyJet carry north of 200 million customers a year, and yet TUI and Thomas Cook are still thriving. Airbnb are coming into the market. In talking of youth, I watch how my daughters book holidays. They're doing Airbnb and they're driving on Ubers and they're doing all the modern stuff. There's room for everyone in the sharing because the overall number of people travelling has grown tremendously.
I think the sharing economy is a phenomenon, and there is room for both, as Nick mentions. But I think sometimes the elephant in the room as well is that a lot of the operators around the UK are heavily regulated, and how we have to dot the I's and cross the T's, excuse the pun, Nick.
It's good to see the advertising
is working, yeah. And we're heavily regulated in regard to health and safety, and consumer protection, where some of the sharing economy companies and new kids on the block have no regulation whatsoever, and that, morally, I think it's the something that the industry needs to address, or the government should address. It is a concern, but the market's there for both. But in terms of what we have to go through, all of us on stage here and a lot of the audience, is jump through hoops to protect consumers, but it's not a fair playing field sometimes.
Sure, so there is a place for it to live side by side. Tristram, do you want to add anything to that?
I totally agree. I think there is. I think if anything, it encourages us to sharpen our pencils, make sure we're focused on what we're doing, and we offer things that can't be done. Look at it in a positive way, can't be done in the sharing economy. And there are lots of things that, although I keep going on about coach touring not being the sexiest, but there are lots of things that are very, very attractive to a lot of people. Obviously, we carry a lot of people, and a lot of people want to do it. So we have to make sure it's focused still.
And there's so many different ways of how people can do things now, which I think that, as you're saying, there's clearly a space for lots of different competition to thrive in that, irrelevant of the numbers or the age of the company. Julia is in the audience. Julia Lablousaid, I think, had a question for our team. Hi, Julia.
Hi, good afternoon. My question, it's talked about slightly before, in a marketplace which is really heavily regulated, the company that I run looks after and works with independent travel companies who are travel agents. What advice would you give any thriving entrepreneurs looking to enter the market when there are barriers around us all the time? We've got Brexit around the corner, but actually we need to bring and encourage new entrants in to keep us thriving.
Julia, what's the name of your company?
It's Advantage Travel Partnership, and we offer business consultancy to independent travel companies.
Okay, so essentially the advice that you would give in this kind of uncertain market and the times that we're in.
Absolutely, yeah. So we help grow the market by putting in processes and facilities in place to break down some of these barriers that I think Richard mentioned in terms of regulation. So we help provide a model that travel companies can tap into. But it is very difficult, and it's when you hear some of the, there's pluses and there's negatives.
Yeah.
But actually, how do we encourage a breed of entrepreneurs nowadays to enter the market?
It's a good question. Tristram, let's start with you, because new players, old players, it's very difficult to gauge what the next step should be. What would your advice be?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Don't do it. Get out.
Yeah, well, there must be easier ways to earn a living, I guess. But it's, the regulations that we come across, being an inbound operator, are probably, obviously, nothing to do with the selling side, but it's more the operating side and the restrictions that hotels have and the health and safety issues. They are more prevalent here in the UK than anywhere else. In fact, as a company, we use the UK standards across Europe, so we know that we have to work to the very highest standards. it's a difficult one, to be honest with you.
I suppose
I'm not quite sure these guys are probably in a better position to...
Well, I've spent 3 years working for an entrepreneur, which has been fascinating. The first thing you have to do is start. So if you're looking to start a new business, you've got to be brave enough to start it. Secondly, you've got to be passionate about the vision of your business, so what is the product you're going to build. And then you just start trading, and you see how day 1 goes, day 2 goes, day 3 goes, and you just have to be really focused and driven on your business. We don't spend any time at all worrying about regulations. We abide by them all. We pay the bonding. That's just irrelevant to us. It's about having the drive and the passion to succeed and having a core product to go after, and then break some rules, but just be bold and brave, do deals, trade. I think that's what today's modern entrepreneur has to do.
Richard?
I think I'd agree with that, and I think if you're starting a new business, you have to have courage on what you're doing and what is your strategy. Your strategy could be the lowest cost operator, could be the best service, could be the most off-the-wall product. Have courage, but travel's a very incestuous business as well, and everybody knows everybody, so ask for advice, ask for favours, and pull the favours in when it's necessary. And I think travel's the world's largest business, I think, but it's a community. So if you've got the courage to start business on your own, as a lot of people have done that, don't be afraid of asking for help from a very close-knit community, I would say.
How many favours have you asked for over the time?
Too many.
And people have agreed?
Yeah, everybody knows everybody, especially in the UK travel industry, and you'd ask for advice. Nick and I used to work together, and now we work for different companies. I'll regularly ask him for advice. I never listen to him, but I'll ask him for his advice.
I never asked Richard for advice.
But it is difficult, I'm sure you'd all agree, when you're starting out to navigate this crazy, chaotic, busy, rapidly changing industry. Nick, what would your advice be?
I think the first thing I would say is the travel industry is a fantastic industry to be in, and the reason so many people like me, Richard, Peter, etc., have been in it for so long is once you join it, you don't tend to leave it because you want to stay in it. So if someone's interested, I would say definitely go for it. The other thing I would say as well is don't worry too much about what's happening today. We do work on quite long planning cycles. So, I'm encouraging my team to think about what we're going to land in 2020, 21, because often those decisions take a while, and whilst next year, this year, are looking tough and consumer confidence down, it isn't going to be like that forever. So I do think about the long term, and I think have something that is unique. There are lots of travel businesses out there, and I think if you're starting something new, you have to really think, can the consumer get this from anyone else, or can I do it in a way that will be more appealing than anyone else? And I think if you've got a great idea, there'll be plenty of people out there who'll back you and advise you.
I mean, I suppose it's a comfort to know that you have got the long-term goal. You have to, of course, in your business. But saying that, then, you clearly know exactly where you're going, the strategy and what it looks like for the next few years ahead. You're about to present to the stock exchange. Can you share more information to us all here about that? Because given that you know so much about what's happening tomorrow and next year, I'd love to know what you're going to say to them.
We're obviously in a closed period at the moment, so it's difficult to talk too much about the future. But
we won't tell anyone.
Yeah, I know there's some of our PR people in here who will tell my boss. So, no, I think, we tend to do 5-year plans, because particularly in a big business like ours, where we have a lot of assets, cruise ships, hotels, aeroplanes, it's really necessary for us to plan that far ahead. And we're always thinking about innovation. We're always thinking about what else can we bring, how can we keep ahead of the market and maintain that. And I think that's what makes it exciting about being in a business like ours.
So how's it going to go when you present to the stock exchange?
I think the stock exchange, we reiterated before that we would hit the consensus of 10% growth in profits. We said that in our pre-close statement, and therefore, hopefully, we won't disappoint the market.
Okay, we'll leave it there. I just want to actually bring in... Oh, Julia, I hope that, by the way, has answered your question. Peter Welch is here, and then we'll open up to questions to the floor. But Peter, if you could raise your hand. I think you had a question for the team. I can't quite... Oh, hello. We'll just grab a microphone to you. And Peter, if you could just let us know where you're from as well, that'd be great.
Hello, Peter Welch from the Walt Disney Company. I was reading a very interesting article, which I have here, which talks about how technology is hijacking our brains. So, and in this article, and I'm reading this, it says that within in a day, the consumer touches, swipes, reads their smartphone 2,517 times per day. 2,517 times a day, we are all looking at our smartphones in some shape or form. Given this new, and this is the question, given this new digital world, is the travel industry fit for purpose?
Oh, good question. And before I let you answer that, make it 2,518, please, because you've got a little app. Use it to get interactive with the questions. Slido.com is where you can partake in anything that you'd like to ask our panelists using the hashtag WTMLDN, WTM London. Peter, fit for purpose is Peter's question. Caroline, I know you've done a lot of research on this, not only in the last 12 months, but probably in the last 5 years, looking at the digital revolution.
Yeah, I mean,
what's your assessment of it?
Well, basically, when you look back 20 years ago, Expedia, Priceline, all these guys were startups, and now they're, you know, global giants in the travel industry. We've seen TUI completely revamp how they distribute. When you're a travel player, you're no longer online or offline, you're omni-channel. You use a variety of different touch points in terms of distribution. And to the question before, I was going to say, well, if you think about the future and how to be successful, I would definitely agree that it needs to be mobile. And the fact that people carry their smartphones with them and they're using them 2,000 times a day, this is only going to increase, especially when you look at Generation Y, the millennials, and their children that are coming up. So definitely the whole industry needs to move omni-channel and particularly mobile. And I think it's the best way as well for you to understand your guests, because suddenly you have access to all this fantastically rich data that they're willing to share with you. They're willing to have, personalized notifications, and that sort of all the, through artificial intelligence, machine learning, you can then tailor and adapt the product specifically to them, and that will then, they'll encourage them to spend more with you. So the brand relationship with the customer is fundamentally driven by technology.
Well, the question was, is the travel industry fit for purpose, looking at the technological
I think we're being a bit mean about them, because I do feel that, already in the UK, 60% of online sales are through mobile. So we're keeping up, and mobile only came into play about 5-6 years ago. The iPhone is only 10 years old. So you have to think there has been massive progress in a very short space of time.
I can't believe the iPhone's only 10 years old. That's crazy. Tristram?
Well, I think one point there that we have to remember is that our end product is not digital, and as far as I can make out, can't be digitized. Travel, you go there for an experience, and if you could easily do it on a tablet or something, you would do it, but you can't smell it, you can't hear it, you can't. We're selling something that is an experiential thing that is not found directly on the internet. So obviously we have to use digital means to get people there, but the end product is not digital.
But I suppose to avoid using those digital means would be at your peril, wouldn't it? Because
Absolutely.
that is the way that people are operating.
No, that's it. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that actually the product is something that is not digitized.
Okay.
It's an experiential thing.
Sure. Fit for purpose, Nick?
I think the travel industry is on the edge of being fit for purpose, so I think it's always chasing that fit for purpose kind of finish line. I think there's been a big recognition a number of years ago that technology is going to play a central part in the travel industry. I referred to the fact that at TUI we still have 600 stores. I probably personally, when I was distribution director 7 or 8 years ago, thought we'd be down to half that amount by now, but we're not, because we've managed to, as many other agents have done, combine technology with customers' desire for personal service as well, so you're definitely getting the best of both worlds. So I think we've got to be careful not to chase technology for technology's sake. What is the business benefit, and what's the customer benefit? Is it making their life easier? Is it making our business more efficient? So I think you've got to be careful that you just don't go all out on a kind of technology frenzy. You've got to understand, what the purpose of it is.
I just wanted to ask you about the shop-facing experience then of your customers? I was recently at a retail industry conference in Amsterdam, and they were talking about how that's really changing from the high street, footfall there, to what's happening online. And you haven't reduced the business, if you like. It hasn't expanded either. So where do you see it going in the next 12 months?
I think the business is quite stable, and I think it's around continuing to innovate. We've just recently developed a prototype that reads your facial expression. So it shows you images of holidays, it reads your facial expression, and depending on how you react to different holiday content, it will then start to serve you that relevant content. So if you saw a beach and really showed you enjoyed that scene of a beach, it'll show you different types of beach scenes, and continuing to iterate.
And the most expensive ones.
The most relevant ones, that's
right,
what we're looking at,
okay.
the one that provides the best value. And then it will come out with a recommendation. So to me, that's a great example of combining technology and emotion to give you a holiday recommendation. So I think that's a great way to use technology, and that's in store. We're going to put it in our big new store in Merry Hill.
Okay, let's go back to that question then, Peter and Richard. Peter first, fit for purpose, the industry when we look at it.
It's very interesting. Around the world, of the 25 million cruises that are sold, less than 10% are booked online. Our Imagine Cruising customers average age 60, often older. They're totally digital savvy, particularly iPad. They know their way around how it works. But almost every one of our bookings is done face-to-face or over the telephone. It's very difficult to explain to someone how to take a balcony cabin versus an inside cabin online, or to persuade someone to take the 5-star hotel option over 4-star in India. And we find our customers want to talk to us and get a lot more out of talking to us. And looking to the forward, of course, digital has become even more important. Personally, I don't think Google and PPC is the answer, and will eventually price itself out of many markets. So digital, well, they are now, for some of the mainstream players, so expensive. It's becoming ineffective for them to actually continue to pay Google that sort of money.
Right.
So I think digital marketing will become hugely important, but the face-to-face human contact when you're selling a dream. And once you arrive in resort, you're not looking at a digital. The product itself, to answer Peter's question, and his magical Mickey Mouse products, they're real, they're not digital. And I think it's often disappointing when people start looking at videos of the destination, because they spoil the enjoyment of arriving and experiencing it. So I'm not going to underplay digital, but the telephone and the face-to-face still have a massively important role to play in travel and selling that dream.
Thank you. Is that something you agree with, Richard?
Yeah, I think predominantly my customer set, one of the brands that we have within the group, the average age of the customer is 67 years of age. Now, the question from Peter was, is it fit for purpose? Well, you're always playing catch-up, and whether they've got companies doing virtual reality and things like that, you're always playing catch-up. But with my own customer group, it's quite, with Shearings Holidays, it shocked me how many of them do look online, research online, and we have 120,000 Facebook followers. So my preconceived ideas of that average of 67-year-old customers changed since I joined the group 6 months ago. Is they are online, they want that face-to-face contact or voice-to-voice contact, but you've just got to try to play catch-up and be relevant. But I agree with Nick, you can get on these ego trips of wanting to be the most cutting edge and stuff. It's what the customer wants and giving them. But inevitably, as soon as you catch up, somebody will move on. So it's just getting it right for your own customer set and listening to what they need, which we do.
It's interesting because I see journalism with this dichotomy as well of how it's working, because you get a virtual experience or social media and sharing of information and videos. And I was at Grenfell Tower at 1:30 in the morning when that fire took hold. You cannot explain, unless you see it for yourself, the devastation of what was unfolding in news terms. And I think that I'm inclined to agree with you if I can share my opinion on that, because the end user product and when you are there or experiencing it is quite something else. Peter, I just wanted to ask you just very quickly, when you asked that question, do you believe the travel industry is fit for purpose?
Well, I would say I'd echo what the panel is saying. We all have to be where the guest is, and we all have to provide what the guest wants. And it is a fact that many of the things that we provide are almost intangible, to use that Disney word magic. And really, it's only human interaction, conversation, that can actually deliver that. So I am completely a believer in person-to-person communication.
Okay, it's good to know, given that's what we're doing now, that it's in fine health. I just want to put some questions that have come through digitally, given that we've been talking about that. Karen is asking the panel, what do you think will be the next big experiential holiday trend? And I'm going to come to you first, Caroline, for that, because you should absolutely be able to put your money on this one.
Well, I think basically at Euromonitor, we've just published a big series of mega trends, and the experience trend is just phenomenal. So we are seeing consumers across all different aspects of their life choosing to spend more on experiences than products and things. So definitely experiences and travel fits very well with that. I think what they're wanting is this kind of, yes, unique, authentic experiences. So even within the travel industry, we're seeing destinations like Peru promoting experiential travel, so that when you go to Peru, you'll have this cultural immersion into, meeting the local culture, meeting the local people, tasting the local gastronomy. So again, travel does that. But it's just how you also position it to your guests, who are definite experience seekers.
Okay, anybody else want to answer that? What do they believe?
I think there's a great opportunity for money can't buy experiences. So we've had a lot of success, for example, with a concert with Catherine Jenkins in front of the Burj Al Arab in Dubai on the beach. Or why not have lunch with Martin Brundle on the day of qualifying in Singapore and ask his views on the race? So I think getting people access to things that they couldn't normally buy, more experiences, I think you'll see more and more of that coming in, because it just enhances the whole travel experience.
How do you do that in the coach industry then, Richard and Tristram, create that different experience? Yeah,
it's a challenge dealing with the experiential expectations of the clients in a mass market, a mass volume business is a challenge, particularly if you've got an itinerary that is going to be in, I don't know, York every Monday at 3:30 from April to October. How do you deliver something every single week that is a kind of wow? It's always a challenge with our little bit in the industry. I think probably what we're trying to achieve is what is it that the clients will go home and tell their friends about. When they have dinner with their friends a week after coming back from holiday, what is it that they'll be saying that in that 2 weeks in Britain and Ireland, what did they do that are almost bucket list things, but also things that they'll be proud of telling their friends. It was brilliant. We had dinner with these people. For example, in Ireland, we have a fantastic supplier, somewhere near Galway called Rathbun Farm, and our groups go and make scones, and she's a great entertainer, and there's sheep in the field and all this sort of thing. I think that's one of those things that our clients will take home with them and hopefully remember forever.
Interesting. Richard?
Yeah, we're constantly, we have, as I said, 66% repeat level, which is really probably industry leading in the sector that we're in. But you've got to try to, familiarity, they love familiarity. They like feeling comfortable, that they know what they're doing, they know where they're going, they know they're going to get looked after. But you have to look for different ways of recognising the fact that they've travelled 50 or 100 times with you, because we have customers like that. Or random acts of kindness. They get to one of our own hotels and they're just recognised by their loyalty or just given something special. So we can differentiate like that. So it's not, a bungee jumping in New Zealand or something like that. But it doesn't matter what sector you're in. If you're in the senior sector, young sector, cruise, I think there's little touch points you can have, and whether it's the little things make the difference. And sometimes those little things are important to some people, and they'll come back to you forever and a day.
Nick, would you like to add next big experiential holiday trend?
I think themed holidays are quite interesting as well. So I think the cruise businesses have done it very well, whether it's a Strictly Come Dancing cruise where you have stars from that show and you attract a very specific market. And the advantage of that type of thing is that you can do it in the off-season where maybe the demand wouldn't have been quite as high. We're doing an 80s cruise within our cruise business next year, and that's virtually already sold out.
Star attraction then?
Well, it's not quite Catherine Jenkins, but it's actually...
more Bananarama.
Well, they've now, because they're just doing a new tour, so they're too expensive. But I think we've got some 80s DJs on, Trevor Nelson. We've got To Power playing. I think Nick Kershaw's on it as well.
Trevor Nelson is still going now.
He appeals to a demographic. Okay. He appeals to a demographic. Okay. So I think that's quite interesting to be able to fill up some of those traditionally more difficult saleable periods. But also I think food and drink is something that's got a, from a holiday perspective, it's got a big future. And what I mean by that is, actually looking at foodie type breaks where you take people overseas and, if you look at the success of shows like Bake Off, like MasterChef, people really want to try the local cuisine, the local wines. And I think if you can immerse them in that and give them different experiences, I think they're prepared to pay for that as well.
Slightly running out of time, and I'm conscious that we just want to open it up to the floor as well. So if anybody would like to ask a question, please do raise your hands and we'll get a microphone to you. Any questions from the floor? Hi, gentleman just there. Simon Calder, just at the back there.
So that's for you, hopefully.
Good afternoon, thank you very much. I think my brain's been hijacked by Brexit. I'm particularly keen to hear from Nick and also from Peter about, after Caroline's extremely interesting thoughts about that, what scenario they are anticipating, please.
I was actually going to end on Brexit with a bang, but I think we should do it now. Why not? Simon, thank you very much. And actually, I might ask you as well, because you've done a lot on this, and I know you have been writing and broadcasting about it. Caroline, Brexit, firstly. How do you deal with it? You gave us 2 scenarios. Out of the 2 of them, which one do you think is going to be more likely? And your tips for the travel industry?
Well, I'm very fortunate. At Euromonitor, we have a team of economists that build these scenarios. And so the macro scenario, the no Brexit deal, has the highest level of probability. So just with what's happening with the negotiations, it has been fairly acrimonious. So it does look like we're veering towards that sort of worst case scenario. But knowing the UK government, they'll pull it back and save the day. But I would say that for Brexit, the inbound side looks very, positive, a little bit more challenging on the outbound side. But as we've discussed in the panel today, it's about promoting value for money, delivering products that are more customized and tailored, and enhancing the whole, in-destination experience through technology so that it's a seamless, enjoyable experience for the customer.
Okay, Nick, TUI UK, your employees, how is it all going to manifest, and what kind of impact do you think it's going to have if it's the worst case scenario, as Caroline said?
Well, I think the key for us is exchange rates, really. If we move away from the operational side and being able to operate our planes and move staff around, I think demand is the key is going to be exchange rates and what that impact that will have on average selling prices. So if there were a no Brexit deal, then it is likely, as I think it was said earlier, exchange sterling would strengthen, which would help us. So I think for us it's about monitoring where those exchange rates are going and then making sure we've got the right product mix to reflect that. I know we've picked up on this theme a few times, but I genuinely believe demand will stay quite robust. It's the extent, it's the price at which people will travel, and you've got to make sure you've got the right type of holiday product that they want, and that's where our big focus is for next year.
What do you think is going to happen?
In terms of whether...
In terms of the Brexit deal?
I think
or no deal?
I think I agree with Caroline. I think there probably will be a deal come the 11th hour. But I think it's hard to tell.
What are you worried about?
I'm predominantly worried about exchange rates. We plan ahead, and I think, again, we'll launch Summer 19 next April. So we're beginning to plan Summer 19 already. And if we have another year where there is no change in exchange rates, then what we've got in 19 is a year where consumers' income can catch up a bit with the price increases that we've seen. So we're immediately I'm beginning to feel optimistic about 19 and onwards. So I'd like to see exchange rates stabilise and improve to help that.
Okay, Simon, you wanted to put that to Peter as well. Peter?
Hello, Simon. So exchange rate always will have an impact on travellers, although since Brexit was announced and the pound is worth less, the cruise industry continues to grow. And as I said earlier, the innovation and growth will probably continue in that regard. Specifically for cruising, the impact on customers, the industry should be relatively unscathed because shipping and cruising is already a very international business. The latest murmurings out to the Home Office say that Britain will probably continue to accept foreign travellers into the UK. The only real change may be the ID card is no longer acceptable, it may be a passport. That then will be reciprocal into European countries. So from people travelling around Europe on ships, there's likely to be almost no impact at all. And there could potentially be an upside. in that duty-free may return, and that could benefit cruisers and cruise lines in the future. So I think there are a lot of areas that are concerned, but the advice I've had from colleagues in the industry is that cruising would be relatively unscathed by whichever way Brexit goes.
I am thinking, though, Peter, that you will undoubtedly be impacted by the regulation and the changes that will bring, perhaps not necessarily straight away, but in the next 5 to 10 years.
I think there may be some, although cruise ships are no longer built in the UK, the expertise of design is very much in the UK, so there may be some concerns amongst cruise lines for bringing foreign people into work with specialism in the UK. But I think it's very likely and practical and common sense that people will still be able to travel around Europe as holidaymakers, and in that regard, cruising will not be impacted.
Richard?
There's a couple of things that concern me about it. First of all, from a hotelier, we have 45 hotels in the UK, and 50% of my colleagues who work in those hotels are from the European Union. And you can see there's a tangible amount. You can see that our team are getting worried about will they be welcome in the UK. Quite a few of them are leaving. It's getting difficult to replace them. So the hospitality sector in the UK is a big concern. And then secondly, it's just it depends what your cost. We're a commercial entity, like all of us here. We're a commercial entity, and can we absorb the input costs with the exchange and pass them on to our customers? Will our customers want to pay them? But I have to say, I sat in on a speech earlier by the Prime Minister of Belgium, who's now one of the chief negotiators for the EU, and he was talking about a transitional period of 2 to 3 years. He was. I thought it was a really good speech, and that gave me a little bit of heart that it won't be a big bang. It'll be a more transitional, as long as we don't fall into this media frenzy. It's a negotiation, and we have to be conscious. It's a negotiation, and there'll be winners and losers, but there's a lot of media frenzy around it.
Well, in the interviews we've been carrying on BBC News, some have said up to 10 years negotiation, so who knows? Tristram, I'll give you an opportunity to answer that in terms of...
Well, very quickly, I totally concur with everything that's been said. It's all about exchange rate, of course, which for us could be positive.
Yeah.
And then the employment scenario is... I live in Kingston, and our office is in Richmond, so we're in Greater London. I beg you to think about the consequences of a hard Brexit, and if we go wherever we go in London, it's probably true of many places in the UK, every bar, restaurant, everything. We're serviced by very good quality staff who are imported, and the thought of losing that is terrifying, frankly.
Simon, I hope that's answered your question. Just very quickly, because I know you've done a lot about this, just your top insight, if you can, for us.
Well, that's kind of you to ask. I've got none at all. But let me tell you what I'm worried about, and that's ETIAS, the Electronic Travel Information and Authorisation Service, which means that everyone with a new British blue passport will be going online to register their intent to travel on one of Nick or Peter's excellent trips to the European Union, with all the opportunities that brings for scammers to intervene. I'm afraid that is going to be a serious concern, and you can already read the papers from Brussels about that. And the other thing is, of course, aviation. Nobody knows anything. This time, a week ago, the Transport Select Committee, they had all the airlines, EasyJet, IAG and so on, saying it's all going to be marvellous. I hope it is, but nobody has given any evidence so far, which is why I was asking your excellent panel what they thought, because I haven't got a clue, frankly.
Interesting. Simon, thank you very much. Yeah, does anybody really have a clue? We'll find out, won't we? We're running out of time, but there's something that I wanted to ask you, and somebody actually said this to me when I was walking into the hall, saying, you always have these panel of guests on, and they're experts in the industry, but do we ever ask them what kind of holidays they go on? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to ask each of you. Richard, I'll start with you. What's your next holiday, and will Shearings Coach Company be involved?
My wife's just had a child, so we've got an 11-month-old. So my holidays, so first child, will change dramatically from far-flung places like New Zealand and Australia probably to the UK, or maybe I'll be adventurous and go as far away as Mallorca with my child.
So a staycation?
Probably, yeah.
On a coach?
Could be, yeah, or drive. We do self-drive holidays as well. But depends what my 11-month-old wants, yeah.
Interesting, the staycation, because that seems to be a favoured one, as you were saying, Caroline. Tristram?
I'll probably do the same thing that I've done for the last 12 years, which is stay with friends in the south of France. If I can squeeze a couple of days on one of our river cruise boats in the south of France, I'll grab it with 2 hands.
We totally believe you.
Yeah.
Peter?
I've just come back from the States visiting my daughter who's working in San Francisco, so that's why I realised it's still great value over there. A couple of days probably in Cornwall, and then maybe try one of our African holidays to get immersed in the real Africa.
Of course you'll get that for free.
No, I'll have to work for it.
Rightly so. Caroline?
I've just come back from the northwest coast of Scotland, so we were up in Gairloch, and it was at the time of Hurricane Ophelia.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
it was very atmospheric.
I'm sure, to say the least. And Nick?
I have a TUI holiday booked.
Well done, by the way. I should just say for the last
I
hour, Thompson TUI, you've done well.
Thank you.
On the rebranding.
Yeah, I've got a TUI holiday booked, and we are going to Lapland for 3 days. I have 2 older daughters who are 19 and 17, and we're going with another couple who have 3 girls under 5. So I think my girls are looking forward to looking after them and seeing their faces when they have a wonderful experience in Lapland.
Well, we're grateful for your time to each and every one of you. Thank you so much. And I know that the conversation is going to continue. And if anybody wants to grab you, I'm sure you'll be okay about having a chat with everybody. But for now, please join me in thanking our panel and also to Caroline for her presentation. And thank you for your time as well. Thank you.